Hello everybody, my name is Jonathan Felici, and my video presentation will be on the therapeutic use of play facilitation technique. According to many authors, play as a therapeutic medium is associated with improved cognition, social interaction, and physical skills of children with disabilities. Now we'll get into definitions of play and terms that a therapist will need to know when it comes to this facilitation technique. Play is used to describe an intrinsically motivated and freely chosen experience that is associated with positive affect and active engagement that often contains elements of fantasy. To provide a better explanation of play, the definition will be broken down into these following characteristics: intrinsic motivation, positive affect, free choice, fantasy, and active engagement. The first characteristic I will talk about is intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation is defined as the process of doing an activity for its own sake, regardless of the reward that is inherent in the activity itself. This motivation comes from within the individual and participates in an activity because it is fun and not only done as a means to an end. For example, someone will do an activity because they like it, not because they're going to win a trophy or any physical tangible item. The second characteristic I will talk about is positive affect. Positive affect includes those behaviors that demonstrate pleasure and enjoyment, such as smiles and laughter. For an action to be considered play, we receive positive feelings associated with engagement in the activity and demonstrate positive affect. Just because an individual is participating in an activity, it may not be considered play for them because of the effect it's having on them. They may not find it enjoyable or dislike the activity. Usually, if someone is smiling and laughing, is a good indicator of play and positive affect. The third characteristic is free choice. Free choice may be defined as an action involving selection without existence or perception of coercion and outside pressures. When an activity is assigned to us, or we are forced to participate in an activity, we often regard that activity as work. For an experience to be considered play, it must be free from external influences. For example, if a child is forcefully put in a situation, in an activity that they do not enjoy, that is not considered play. For them to consider an activity play, the child must have the freedom to choose it and the freedom to enjoy it through their own experiences. The fourth characteristic is fantasy. Fantasy, fantasy involves actions that are separated from reality. Within play, actions are associated more with our imagination rather than reality. Players merely act out an event. Actions by players are separated from reality in that participants may experiment in novel actions and risk failure without real consequences actually happening. Last but not least is active engagement. Active engagement associated with play includes being involved in play physically and psychologically without being distracted or diverted from the activity. When playing, the person is absorbed in the activity to the point where the person loses a sense of time and surroundings. According to Piaget, there are 4 stages of play that occur during different points of a child's cognitive development. A child progresses through stages as the child grows through during the first year and continues through age 6. These stages are sensory motor play, construction play, symbolic play, and games with rules. First is sensory motor play. The sensory motor play involves repetitive actions of sensory or motor activities that result in enjoyment. Usually, sensory motor play occurs during the child's first year, between 1 to 14 months of age. Typically, this type of play involves manipulation of objects without a particular goal. For example, a young child putting blocks in spaces or shaking their favorite toy. Construction play involves the manipulation of objects with the intent of making something. During construction play, the child takes a clear interest in manipulating and creating something out of objects. Construction play generally occurs between 15 to 24 months of age. With symbolic play, participants use fantasy to change into different people, objects, or situations as reflected by verbal expressions and motor movements. This stage of play typically begins during the second year of life and continues through age 6. The fourth cognitive play stage is games with rules. These are identified as the active involvement of 2 or more participants in a competitive activity where the parameters for participation are agreed upon in advance. By the age of 5 or 6, children often begin to develop logic necessary for games with rules. Along with cognitive play stages, there are social levels of play. The social levels of play, such as solitary and associative, differ from cognitive stages of play in that they are not dependent on cognitive development, even though children tend to progress to higher levels of social play. All levels of social play occur throughout a person's life. The primary social levels of play are solitary play, parallel play, associative play, and cooperative play. Solitary play is action directed toward an object in an environment that may or may not involve proximity to another individual and does not include others. During solitary play, the person plays independently with no reference to others. Parallel play involves play that is independent of other people but occurs near them. During parallel play, children may play with the same materials and or within close proximity to each other, but they are not playing directly with each other. The third social level of play is associative play. Associative play includes active involvement of 2 or more children for short periods of time. Playing with other children along with little organization characterize associative play. Although participants may play together, the individual's needs and interests take precedence over the group's needs and interests. Groups exhibiting associative play are often composed of 2 to 3 people who interact with each other. Interactions occurring with associative play typically are sustained for short periods of time. The fourth level of social play is cooperative play. Cooperative play is organized play intended to meet a group goal chosen by the players. This level of play may consist of group play, assignment of specific roles, and active cooperation for sustained intervals. Examples of this level of play are cooperative games and socio-dramatic play that involve social play, including role plays, reciprocal interaction among players, persistence, verbal communication, and imagination. For some history, the emergence of play as a therapeutic medium appeared during the 20th century. Society began to view play as a valuable part of the child's life. Psychologists such as Freud and Erikson brought play to the forefront and demonstrated the effectiveness of play in working with children. More recently, therapeutic use of play in adults and the use of video games to enhance mental and motor functioning is gaining attention, although associated research is limited. As with most techniques, therapeutic use of play has theoretical foundations. Each theory attempts to explain the role of play and demonstrates its benefits to children. The following theories are developmental theory, psychosocial theory, and sociocultural theory. Developmental theory is based off of Piaget and the cognitive play stages, stating as children get older and develop, they tend to progress to higher levels of play. For psychosocial theory, Erikson hypothesized that personality is shaped by outside factors such as society's expectations and social interactions, and identified 8 stages of life crisis that are experienced by individuals. The stages explain personality traits developed depending on how a person resolves each crisis. If a person resolves a challenge positively, positive personality traits emerge with help in overcoming challenges. And as for sociocultural theory, Vygotsky focused on social aspect of play that contributes to cognitive development. A child's capabilities are shaped by culture and social relationships in which a child is raised. Nicolo Polo provided a discussion of Vygotsky's social theory that is based on the description of the theory and stated that play is a social symbolic activity. Cognitive processes are developed through communication with the environment and social interaction with others. A child learns and develops in a social context that includes more knowledgeable and capable peers and adults who convey cultural heritage. One intervention that can be used for therapeutic use of play is the game of catch. If a child has a low gross motor skill, the therapist can use this as a technique to help them build on their motor skills. A therapist can see an individual child multiple times a week and work on different levels of of catching to help build their motor skills. They can start from a short distance one day, work on that. As the child progresses, the further back the therapist will move until they have reached a certain goal that they set for themselves. Another game that they could use is playing Uno for children with cognitive disabilities. These children may have struggles in counting, describing colors, or waiting their turn. With Uno, the cards will help them see different colors, know when to go, they could work together, and so forth. Another therapeutic use of play could be the game of basketball. If someone is experiencing depression, they could be integrated into a league to play basketball, to become part of a team, to socially interact with others, and give them a positive feeling of life. Also, people who are depressed may feel they do not belong in certain places. Belonging to a team can give them that sense of belonging that they desire. The technique that we will use to implement is to play a game of catch with a person with a traumatic brain injury. Now, an individual with a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, can experience physical changes such as impairments in weakness, muscle tone and coordination problems, and balancing difficulties. The first thing the therapist will want to do is determine the level of severity of the TBI, whether it is low, moderate, or very aggressive, or advanced. Depending on the severity, the therapist and the client or patient will try to set goals on what they would like to accomplish, like the level of yardage they would like to start with and end up with at the end, of how far they want to throw and be able to catch a ball. To adapt this with a person with TBI, if they have a severe version of TBI, they may need some initial assistance. So instead of having them try to catch it initially by themselves, you may want to have an extra individual holding their arms out while the therapist gently drops the ball instead of just starting off with a little lob. This can help them get the feel for catching, help their motor skills. You can have them sit in a seat so they do not lose their balance while trying to catch the ball and hurt themselves.